Did you know there are things many Christians consider sin, but God never called sin? Normal activities, responsible decisions, even acts of spiritual maturity that have been demonized from pulpits, religious conversations, and human traditions. People carrying unnecessary guilt, feeling spiritually defective over actions the Bible never condemns. 1. Enjoying things that are not explicitly Christian. There is a widespread mindset that claims everything without a Christian label is automatically suspicious, as if the mere fact that something is not produced within a religious environment makes it impure. Many people live with guilt for watching a movie that is not Christian, for enjoying common entertainment, or for participating in normal activities that are not directly linked to the church. But the Bible does not divide the world into religious and sinful in such a simplistic way. What it does teach is discernment. Not everything that exists is edifying, but not everything that fails to explicitly mention God is sin either. The issue is not that something is secular. The issue is the content and the effect it produces in the heart. There are movies that are not Christian and contain nothing that contradicts biblical principles. And there are others that, although popular, open doors to unnecessary violence, sexual immorality, the normalization of sin, or the distortion of values. The mature believer does not live by extreme prohibitions, nor by recklessness. They live by discernment. It is not about demonizing everything, but about filtering with wisdom. Moreover, today you have tools to research before consuming content. You can read reviews, consult analyses, and understand what you are about to watch, not only for yourself, but also for your children. Spiritual responsibility includes protecting your mind and your family. It is not a sin to watch a movie that is not Christian. The sin may lie in deliberately exposing yourself to content you know feeds wrong desires or normalizes what God calls sin. The difference is intention and discernment. Maturity does not live in paranoia, but neither does it live in naivety. Not all entertainment is harmful, but not all entertainment is healthy. God did not call you to live isolated from the world, but to live with sound judgment within it. When you choose wisely, without unnecessary guilt, but with clear boundaries, you are exercising self-control. You do not need to label everything as sin to protect your faith. You need to discern what builds you up and what weakens your spirit. 2. Setting boundaries with people. Setting boundaries is not selfishness. It is spiritual maturity. However, many believers carry guilt every time they say no. They feel obligated to always be available, to answer every call, to solve every problem, and to carry responsibilities God never assigned to them. They were taught that love means sacrificing yourself to the point of exhaustion, that setting boundaries is coldness, that prioritizing rest is a lack of commitment. But Jesus, the perfect model of love, constantly withdrew. He stepped away to pray, left crowds waiting, did not respond to every demand, and never allowed external pressure to define his internal obedience. Loving does not mean allowing emotional abuse, manipulation, or constant draining. Loving also does not mean saying yes to everything. The Bible teaches in Galatians that each person must carry their own load, showing there is a difference between helping and carrying what does not belong to you. When you fail to establish boundaries, you end up serving from resentment, not from love. And God is not looking for exhausted slaves, He is looking for obedient children. Saying no when necessary does not break the commandment of love, it protects it, because true love does not arise from obligation, but from freedom. Furthermore, the absence of boundaries can become a subtle form of spiritual pride. Believing that everything depends on you, that if you do not intervene, everything will collapse, that you must be present in every conflict, every service, and every need, is assuming a role that belongs only to God. Scripture never calls the believer to be omnipresent or omnipotent. Jesus himself did not heal everyone in Israel, nor respond to every human expectation.
If the Son of God operated with boundaries, why would you demand more of yourself than he did? Guilt over setting boundaries often stems from fear of rejection or the judgment of others, not from biblical conviction. When you learn to set healthy boundaries, you are not rejecting people. You are properly stewarding the life God gave you. Protecting your time, your energy, and your peace is not a lack of spirituality. It is stewardship. And when you serve from balance, your service is genuine, not forced. God did not ask you to sacrifice yourself until you break. He asked you to love Him and love others with wisdom. 3. Seeking therapy or psychological help. One of the most damaging myths within some Christian environments is the idea that seeking psychological help is a lack of faith, as if going to a professional were a spiritual betrayal or a declaration of unbelief. There are people carrying severe anxiety, depression, unresolved trauma, or deep emotional imbalances. Yet they prefer to remain silent out of fear of being judged as spiritually weak. Some even abandon medical treatments because they believe taking medication means not trusting God.
But the Bible never teaches that faith excludes means. God can heal supernaturally. Yes, He can perform miracles, restore, and raise up even from death. But He can also work through processes, doctors, counselors, and treatments. Scripture speaks of wisdom, counsel, and caring for the body. Not every emotional problem is demonic, nor is every mental struggle a lack of prayer. We live in a fallen world with bodies and minds that can become ill. Seeking help does not mean replacing God. It means recognizing that He can use human tools to bring healing. Refusing to receive help out of spiritual pride is not faith. It may be imprudence. However, balance is essential. Seeking therapy does not mean removing God from the center. God's will must remain the priority. Prayer, the Word, and communion with Him are not replaced. They are complemented by healthy processes. Taking prescribed medication does not cancel your faith. It may be part of the answer you are asking for. Going to a psychologist does not mean God is not listening to you. It may mean He is guiding you into a responsible process of restoration. Mature faith does not deny reality. It confronts it with wisdom. Just as you would not refuse to treat a physical illness because you consider it a lack of faith, neither should you ignore mental health. God is not offended when you care for what He Himself created. Seeking help with discernment, without idolizing the professional, but without despising the resource, is biblical balance. True spirituality does not deny processes. It integrates them under God's direction. If you have made it this far, write in the comments, "I walk with discernment," not with guilt, not as a pretty phrase to repeat, but as a conscious decision to live according to the Word. 4. Changing the church you attend. Changing churches is not automatically a sin, but neither is it a light decision. We live in a culture where many people move from congregation to congregation every time something displeases them, as if the church were a service to be switched when it becomes uncomfortable. That behavior does not produce roots. A tree that is constantly transplanted cannot establish itself in firm soil. It does not grow deep, it does not strengthen, and it does not bear consistent fruit. Spiritual life also requires permanence, process, and commitment. No church is perfect because it is made up of imperfect people. There will be mistakes, differences of opinion, styles you may not always like, and moments of tension. If every discomfort becomes a reason to leave, the problem is not always the church. Sometimes it is a lack of maturity. We must not fix our eyes on men because men fail. The church does not exist to satisfy all our preferences, but to shape us. Leaving out of whim, wounded pride, or simple dissatisfaction can reveal spiritual instability. Remaining, working through conflicts in a healthy way, and growing in the midst of imperfection is also part of the process of Christian maturity.
However, there are situations where remaining is not healthy. If you encounter practices that clearly contradict Scripture, if spiritual leadership produces manipulation, abuse, or doctrinal distortion, if you begin to develop constant bitterness in your heart or consistently lose your peace, then it is wise to evaluate. God does not call you to remain in an environment that damages your faith or compromises your conscience. It is not about searching for a perfect church because it does not exist, but for one where you can grow, learn, and serve without compromising biblical principles. Changing congregations when it is a prayed-through, mature decision based on discernment is not betrayal. It may be spiritual protection. The key lies in the motivation of the heart. If you leave to avoid confrontation or correction, that is immaturity. But if you move seeking spiritual health and faithfulness to the Word, that is wisdom. Stability is important, but spiritual health is even more so. 5. Disagreeing with or questioning your pastor. Questioning is not rebellion when it is born from the desire to understand and remain faithful to the Word. However, for years, many believers have been conditioned to accept everything that is preached without examining it. They were taught that asking questions is a lack of submission, that analyzing is intellectual pride, and that comparing teachings with Scripture is disrespect. But the Bible does not support that culture of passive silence. In Acts 17, the Bereans are commended because they examined the Scriptures daily to verify whether what Paul taught was true. Paul was not offended. Discernment was celebrated. That means spiritual maturity does not consist in agreeing with everything, but in testing everything. Spiritual authority is not above the Word, it is subject to it. When someone preaches, their message must withstand the biblical filter. Questioning with humility, supported by Scripture, is not looking for conflict, it is seeking truth. Faith is not strengthened by repeating phrases, it is strengthened by understanding foundations. If something does not align, if an interpretation seems forced, if an emphasis creates legitimate doubt, opening the Bible and studying is not disloyalty, it is spiritual responsibility. God did not call you to depend blindly on men. He called you to know His voice. Furthermore, learning to question with prudence prevents fanaticism and protects the church from doctrinal errors. Christian history shows that many deviations began when no one dared to examine what was being taught. Not every disagreement is division. Many times it is growth. When you ask from a place of honor, without a spirit of confrontation, you demonstrate maturity. The problem is not questioning. The problem is doing so from arrogance or rebellion. But when you do it grounded in the Word with a teachable spirit, you are obeying the command to test the spirits and hold fast to what is good.
A mature pastor does not fear sincere questions. He receives them as an opportunity for edification. Biblical submission is not absolute silence. It is order and respect within the framework of truth. God does not want believers who are intellectually dependent. He wants disciples who are firm in doctrine. Questioning with foundation strengthens your faith, makes you study, forces you to go deeper, and prevents you from living by tradition. You are not sinning by analyzing. You are growing by discerning. 6. Earning a lot of money or having financial success. For years, the idea has taken root that the more spiritual you are, the less you should have, as if poverty were automatically synonymous with holiness and prosperity a sign of corruption. Many believers feel guilty when things go well for them, when their business grows, when they receive a promotion, or when they achieve financial stability. They wonder if they are becoming too worldly, if success is pulling them away from God, if they should live with less in order to appear more spiritual. But the Bible does not condemn wealth itself. It condemns the love of money. The difference is profound. Money is a tool. Disordered love toward it is the problem. God blessed men like Abraham, Job, and Solomon with abundance, and they were still used by Him. Scripture teaches that the Lord gives the power to create wealth, not to generate pride, but to fulfill purpose. Financial guilt often stems from a false humility that confuses scarcity with purity. But poverty does not automatically sanctify, just as wealth does not automatically condemn. What God examines is the heart, not the amount in your bank account. Moreover, success that is well managed can become a powerful tool for the kingdom. With resources, you can support your family with dignity, sustain ministries, help those in need, and open doors others cannot. Feeling guilty for prospering is rejecting a possible divine assignment. What is dangerous is when money becomes identity, security, or ultimate priority. When the heart clings to wealth, idolatry is born. But generating income, growing professionally, and building stability is not sin. It may be responsibility. The key is who governs your heart. If money is your Lord, you will lose your way. If God is your Lord, money will be an instrument.
Scripture does not teach you to be ashamed of prospering. It teaches you to be generous, just, and wise. Success is not the opposite of spirituality. Greed is. You can be faithful, upright, and financially blessed at the same time without betraying your faith.
7. Saying no to serving in church when you are exhausted. Serving is a privilege, but doing it from constant exhaustion is not spirituality. It is burnout. Many believers feel guilty when they decline a responsibility in church because they are tired. They believe saying no is a lack of commitment, that resting is lukewarmness, that prioritizing their emotional health is selfishness. They were taught that the busier they are with religious activities, the more they please God. But serving out of obligation does not honor God. A willing heart does. When service is born out of extreme fatigue, it begins to produce frustration, irritability, and silent resentment, and that does not glorify God. Jesus himself invited the disciples to step away and rest when they were exhausted. Rest is not a lack of faith, it is divine design. God does not need you to burn out to prove your loyalty. When someone serves constantly without pause, they may reach a point where they lose their joy and continue only out of pressure. And serving without joy becomes a burden, not worship. Saying no when you are exhausted is not disobedience. It may be spiritual honesty. What God desires is sincere surrender, not forced activity. However, it is also important to understand that rest must not become a permanent excuse. There is a difference between protecting your limits and using fatigue as justification to avoid responsibility. Spiritual maturity knows how to discern between a legitimate need for rest and comfort disguised as necessity. But when exhaustion is real, when your body and mind are overwhelmed, when serving begins to affect your health or your family, stopping is wisdom. God does not measure your love by the number of tasks you accept, but by the quality of your obedience. Balanced service produces lasting fruit. Forced service produces premature weariness. The church does not depend on you as if you were indispensable. It depends on God. And when you remember that, you can serve with freedom and rest without guilt. God understands your limits because He Himself designed them. Saying no at the right time can protect your calling in the long term. Serving from fullness honors God more than serving from pressure. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "I choose to live without false guilt, but with true conviction." Not as an emotional phrase, but as a conscious decision. And if you want to continue going deeper into the Word without religious masks and without unnecessary burdens, subscribe to Faith Unmasked. Here we do not soften sin, but we do not invent condemnation either. Here we return to what God truly said.